Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ellen. So today for our tutorial, we're going to work on this really cool wet on wet watercolor technique. We're going to paint this botanical atmospheric landscape, and I'm going to go over how to do this step by step. This is a technique that I find so awesome and so useful for those who get frustrated with wet on wet and that it dries too quickly. This is where you can play with it because it lasts a lot longer. And it's really just kind of simple technique by wetting the back of your paper and then the front of your paper and sticking it to a surface that it will stay stuck to. And then you're just painting and splattering and all that good stuff. If you have any questions, please leave in the comment section. Also check out my Patreon where I have exclusive tutorials on Thursdays, a live stream in the top tier. I have some traceables that go with some of my YouTube videos and traceables that go with my exclusive tutorials. It's just a place people go and support my channel, which I appreciate so much. I also have a private Facebook group where we do weekly challenges and monthly giveaways. It's really great. You can check out that in the link below in the comments in the description. And so without further ado, let's get painting wet on wet, splattering, and learning some kind of cool techniques in watercolor that maybe you've never thought about before. So let's get painting. All right, I'm going to go over some supplies I'm using. I'm using Arch 100% cotton cold pressed paper. This is from a pad. I have this piece of, well, basically it's a portable easel and it's just plastic. But if you have a piece of plexiglass, you can grab like something like plastic or has like a very kind of plasticky kind of surface. And I just kind of propped it up on something in here so it's leaning downward. There are like plexiglass like clipboards and stuff like that, but you just want something that you can do this wet on wet technique with. I'm going to use my Princeton 12 Neptune series and maybe my 8 long round Velvet Touch series. And so this wet on wet watercolor technique I have used before, and I've showed a video on this. We're going to do it again for people who haven't looked at the video or tried it before. I also gave you a reference photo, but we're just going to use the reference photo for like really kind of really beautiful grasses and foliage and some botanicals in here. So this is a great technique if you want to do wet on wet, and you know how sometimes when you do wet on wet it dries too fast. It stays wetter longer, and it helps you kind of bleed things in more. So you take your piece of paper, right, and you're going to wet the back of it. Flip it over, wet the back of it. And by the way, I also have a bunch of greens mixed up here. I have a dark, medium, and a light green. I'm going to start off with that. I'll be using a bunch of different colors, but just good to have the colors kind of mixed up on the side. You know, you're gonna have the greens mixed up because I don't take the greens from the tube, and then I'll grab some paint from like burnt umber and paynes gray, etc., and then I can grab some you know, colors if you want to do. You know, the foliage here doesn't have bright colors, but if you want to pop in some bright colors with cadmium red light, just any kind of lilac or whatever colors you have, a pink. I have bright rose here. And also, please have some white gouache handy or white acrylic ink. So I have some white gouache here. We're going to loosen that up and splatter it, and it creates this really kind of cool technique. So like I said, so you can use the pink, you can use the cadmium red light, or whatever colors you have. Whatever works. So, like I said, we're going to wet this side. This is the more smooth side. This is the rough side we paint on. You can grab any kind of sponge, right? And you're going to, or you can even use like a paintbrush. But we don't want it super wet. We want it wet enough till we can just, it basically sticks to the plastic. So I'm getting this wet on the back side. You can use a sea sponge. That works really well. And you flip it over, and it will just basically adhere. Let me just make sure. I'm going to use my sea sponge. I don't know if that sponge is really great. Yeah, this one works better. So it sticks basically. You feel it stick to the paper, to the plastic. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Get this all wet. So now we have a wet on wet paper that stays wet for a longer period of time. I know, it's fantastic. And then when it dries, it should dry pretty flat because it's been stuck to the back. So now we're going to play around with skies and whatnot. I'm grabbing the 12 brush. You can do the gray sky. You can make a blue. I want to play around with some cobalt mixed in with some paynes gray. and get that done pretty quickly. You want to move fast, a little bit fast though. Okay, I'm just going to start to put in some sky. I'm going to lift it up even more actually. Just putting in a little sky. I might add a little more gray to it. You can make any color you want. You don't have to follow the picture exactly. The picture is just for inspiration. And I'll get a little darker up here. Maybe mine will be more cloudy. We can play around with putting in some clouds or just making the color less dark down here. I'm kind of twisting the paint off. Get that cloud technique. Or you can take a paper towel if you want to have clouds and lift. There's no clouds in the actual photograph, but you see what I'm saying? You can play around with that. Your sky. And then the bottom is just a bunch of mixture of greens and browns and all that stuff. You can start playing with that. I've got some burnt umber here. Loosen that up, and Paynes gray. And I'm just going to take my brush and kind of go up and down movements where you see the dark areas. I know it's kind of going dark early, but I'm playing around with that. Just close your eyes, squint, grabbing some medium greens. That's why you want your greens ready too. See, I'm just going to go like this real quick, kind of bleeding in the color, light greens. I know there's like a pine tree here. I'm just kind of loosely kind of throwing it in here. We have trees in the background here. It's really just an exercise on playing with the wet on wet technique, excuse me. Put that tree back here. It's going to bleed. Just some fun grasses. Kind of grab that light green color. I'm really just going to go in for it. You can make much brighter colors if you want. Mine are pretty, like, olivey kind of colors. If you want to have more fun colors, maybe grab a peacock blue, make a brighter green. It's all preference. See, this green's going to turn a little bit brighter. Grab my yellow. It won't be such a dull yellow green. And loosen that up. Much brighter, see? Kind of playing around, going up and down. And you see all those little white botanical blooms in there, right? I'm even going to grab the brown. You see, like in the distance, you see a little brown back here. I'm just really tapping on the paper. I'm really not even touching the paper that much. Going in here again. There's a tree back here. Let's put the tree trunk. And just tapping the paper. It's still damp with the dark green and some medium greens for that tree. Now it's not perfect, and it's not meant to be. Just kind of play around with the tree. And then, of course, we have that tree up here. See, I'm just kind of tapping the color, the branches. Now you can get for the branches, take it right from the tube. I'm mixing the burnt umber with Paynes gray. Minimal water. See, you can make the little branches. Just see, I'm just barely touching this paper, and it's still damp, and it's kind of bleeding slowly, which is nice. I'm just going to do some really light burnt umber branches, kind of in the background here, going up in here, and I see some kind of sticking out over here on the side. You have a nice bleed, soft bleed. Again, just doing this in really light branches out here. And then we see some trees in the background, kind of funky. I'm just going to do some little tippy taps. Trees. I'm going to go back and grab my greens really quickly. And just tapping with this tip of the brush. Grab some darker color up in here. Now this area kind of dried, so you get a dry look, but that's okay. Down here it's really bleeding, which is nice. Like I said, it stays wet on wet longer. So it's kind of like you have more time to play. And I'm going to go back in with some browns in here. I see some yellows. It's like, we didn't do any colors on here yet. We can go back in. I'm going to get some really light burnt umber. Water this down. Kind of play around with that. Just go like this real quick. You don't have to fill the whole paper up if you don't want to. I see some yellows and some oranges. I'm loosening up my brilliant orange over here. Now you could either tap, or you can get really, really thick from the tube and just really kind of place it in there. Or you can even splatter. Do a little splatter, we'll see what happens. Playing around with that color. I like that color. And cadmium red light. Gonna try and activate that. Although the photograph doesn't show the red, I can just put it in myself. Little taps. See, we have all this time to play. Clean up my brush. I'm still using number 12. And I'm gonna go grab some more nice medium green. So I have cadmium yellow deep. If you grab cobalt, it makes kind of like that. It's not like a really vibrant green because it dulls it down a little bit. It's like a bluish green here. It's kind of thick, and I'm gonna go in here. I'm just going. See, I'm just going. This movement really fast, really quick, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then even from here, you can grab some thick paint, a burnt umber and Payne's gray. Going in here. Get a lot of energy. Just slightly touching this paper. Just getting the feeling of those grasses. It's like an, nice atmospheric, abstract type of painting. And my tree got a little funky in here. But that's okay. This is not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to just get used to painting with this wet on wet technique. I'm going to go in and grab some greens. Darker ones. I add Prussian blue to make it darker. A little paint, burnt umber. And I get that dark green. Really kind of thick, and I can still just tap it in here. Play around with that a little bit. I love the little fuzziness of that. Go in here and add some deeper greens. Now, I also didn't mention you can use a credit card if you have that close by. And see, it's so wet still, which is great. We can take the credit card. Of course, now I can't find mine. Oh, there we go. You can scrape up some grasses. It might flow right back into the paint, into the area scraped because it's still very, very wet. You can try that. At this point, we can take the gouache, since it's very, very wet, water it down and splatter that. And it has a spreading technique, which is kind of nice. Because all those little teeny flowers here. That we see in the field. Little teeny ones. Teeny taps. Look how pretty. And it's going to keep doing its thing. It's going to keep spreading like that. So our little flowers in the field. I'm already liking it. And this, how long did this take us to do? It's really kind of effortless, right? I'll go back in with some of that orange. Activated it a little thicker. I'm going to tap in some orange. You see kind of like this orangey color kind of coming up in here. And even some cadmium yellow deep. Just kind of tapping that color in here. It's still very damp, but I'm adding some of that bright yellows that you see. This is an interpretation of this picture. We are not going to paint it to the T. It's your abstract interpretation. See, I'm just tapping in really right out of the tube and mix up some of that orange. You see like those orange colors over down in here. And some deeper greens. We'll put those into. And then we have that. Here's a deeper green color. Kind of place that underneath some of the white. What highlights it even more. It's still kind of doing this spreading thing. If it was thicker, it wouldn't spread as much. I'm going to put some dark greens in here. And you could put some nice stems, see? Just going down here and adding some stems. Some browns. Back here. and let it do its thing. Still very, very damp, but I love this look. And really effortless, right? How long has this taken us to do this? Minimal time. Going back and adding some light greens. Back here. I'm just kind of tapping the colors, the greens. They're still very damp in here, which is really nice. And when you let this dry on your plexiglass or whatever you have, you can get plexiglass at Lowe's, Amazon. This is like a plastic sheet, not sheet, but it's a plastic easel. So if you don't have that, like I said, you can just get a piece of plexiglass, and you can get that anywhere. Lowe's, and I'm going to add some orange back here. Putting that color in a little bit, and some tapping a little bit of yellow back here. And we have this beautiful, unique, grassy, botanical feel. You can get technical and add, here I'm adding the branches of the pine tree. Just grabbing it, burnt umber and a little Paynes gray from the tube. Putting in the branches. But really, it's not necessary. And go down here. And that's it. Really, that's it. You're going to let that dry, and you have this really kind of beautiful atmospheric kind of painting. That took, was it less than 15 minutes to paint? It's really pretty. And because it's that wet on wet technique with the paint, putting the water in the back and the water in the front, it just stays that subtle bleed kind of situation. And I really enjoy doing this. You can do this so many different ways. And then the colors can be really, like I said, vibrant. I have more muted colors, more neutral colors here. I'm just going to add some more browns. But please, feel free to make it brighter. Even if it's a little bit darker, I'm going to go in and add some darker tones here. This tree, it's like a funky pine tree. I'm going to add some more up here. Now it dried kind of up here, so this is going to have a little more of a dry brush effect. Now I did talk about using my 8 long round, but I decided not to. I didn't need to. I'm still using number 12 Neptune series. And I'll grab some light green. Aerate those branches. And that's it. So try and play around with this technique. It's really great. I know, because what happens was when people do wet on wet, that whole section they're trying to work on just basically dries, and this stays wet longer. So you can play around with bleeds and all that good stuff. Let me know if you tried this. Has it worked out for you? If it hasn't worked out for you, etc., etc. And that's it. That's our little field. I mean, I love it. It took like nothing to do. Now see, it's still very, very damp. If I try and scrape, it won't do it. You're going to have to wait. But I just love this kind of mush in the flowers. This kind of got a little too much mushing. So you can go in, if that happens to you, getting the colors here, and kind of go in here in between and try and get some of the dark colors in between that, or even some grasses with the gouache, because it just kind of mushed into like one big ball. So that's it. You can just go in here while it's still damp. You can add a couple of darker tones, play around with that, you know, until you feel satisfied. Don't overwork it. I think just when it's nice and sweet and simple, that's the best way. So don't forget to hit the bell notification buttons to know when my tutorial is up. You know, some people were saying they weren't getting notifications, and make sure you click on that to know when my tutorial is up. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and have fun painting this wet on wet technique. You'll really love it. I'm telling you, you'll love it. Enjoy.